daughter mentioned the word expert in her introduction. None of us are experts.
No.
We're family people that happen to have an addiction, a family member in addiction. And we have two, this is my wife Janine. We have two adult daughters, okay, and one is in long-term recovery now. I don't know if you parents that have two siblings, but you know, one was a risk taker and one was a rule follower. And the risk taker, of course, this is her story. So, and keep in mind, you know, we have a lot of people that maybe are still in addiction or in recovery or family members. This is coming from a family perspective a little more, okay? So, from being involved in FAN since it started, and also as members of the FAN Friends and Family Support Group, I have found that, because we have many people that roll in and out of those meetings, okay, and tell their stories. And from what I find, that every story is different but the same in the end. And what I mean is that there are so many questions that we as parents have along the journey, right? Why did this happen? What started it? You know, what was the drug of choice? You know, did we contribute to this? Maybe we have some guilt. You know, so, and where we seek help, you know, and is there going to be an outcome, good or bad, in this situation, you know? So, and I, too, you know, as family members, we get sucked into this problem of addiction, you know. None of us ask for it, but we get pulled into it, whether we're ready or not, and whether we like it or not. So, in the end, the stories are the same because it all centers around addiction, you know, and how we deal with it as family members. Now, our story is a long story. It's 15 years from addiction to relapses, many relapses, and recovery. And going through that journey for about 10 years, I guess, you know, as many of you parents now, you're going through many highs and lows, stressing out, right, not sleeping, you know, the guilt maybe, the worry, the lack of control, okay, that's a big one. We don't have lack of control. Or we just don't have control over the addicts at certain points. So, and for us, you know, having a daughter living on the streets, that's not very, you know, that makes it hard to sleep at night when you don't know where she is, who she's with, what's going on, right? So, you know, by the grace of God, our story has ended with a positive outcome, where many families, unfortunately, do not. And we've heard that tonight. So, you know, as parents, we all remember how good our kids were, right? And our daughter was one of those good kids, you know, great in class, intelligent, could play the piano, taught the kids at church, you know, choir. So she was a good kid, right? But she started drinking and using marijuana in high school. And after a snowboarding injury, accident, she was prescribed opiates. And that's where the story really got interesting, right? So that's where it started 10 years of hell for the family and her sister. And her addiction involved, you know, one drug to the next. And she tried every drug on the street, I'm going to tell you, including heroin. And she was the risk taker. So over the next 10 years, she was incarcerated 3 times, once in Oakland County, once in Macomb, and once in Washtenaw. And some of her crimes included 3 DUIs, a larceny, cocaine possession, retail fraud, driving on a suspended license. And because of all that, we had many expenses and lawyer fees and court costs, multiple rehab bills, right? And more goes on, right? But I do remember when we were in Washtenaw County Jail, telling the probation officer we were going through all this, and I still said to him, and I still believe it today, our family members are not criminals. They're addicts. That's what drives the criminal activity. And that's what I told him. I still believe it. So at this point, I mean, the story could go on and on, but I can't talk that long. So my daughter at this point lost everything. She lost her relationships with the family, her sister, her uncles, her aunts. And these relationships, you know, can be damaged severely long term, too. So she, believe it or not, during that crisis period, she was going to U of M and she got a degree in dental hygiene, okay, which is unbelievable. But she lost her, she got her degree. She lost her license, okay, her hygiene license. She lost numerous jobs. This is when she was heavy into the addiction. She lost her driver's license, she lost her car, she lost her love, she lost her faith. She lost our trust, which happened earlier in this, really. She lost her self-worth, and she almost lost a leg because of injecting heroin, I believe, in her leg. So at one point in our lives, Janine and I actually started to discuss funeral plans. Okay, when we get that phone call, what are we going to do? You know, so we start talking about that. This last arrest in Washtenaw County, though, she was put in there for 90 days. And she actually said she was glad to be arrested. And believe it or not, this is where her journey began in recovery. I don't know if anybody's detoxed in jail, but I haven't, but I can't imagine that being a very pleasant experience, right? There's also a women's prison ministry that came in and started talking to her again, okay? And that really helped, and you said you do that. That's awesome. This time, she was ready to change her life. She had that moment of clarity, right, that everybody talks about. And also, she was in Judge Burke's sobriety court program over there in Washtenaw County. And that really put her on the right path, okay, and got her started. So, you know, a couple years later now, recovery is her life now. She's been in recovery 6 years, okay? And this might sound like a country song, but she got her self-worth back. You know, she got her driver's license back, but it took her 4 years to get it back. She got her car back. She got her dental hygiene license back over 2 years. I think professional health people, you know, there's a longer, more involved process to get your license back. She got her faith back. She got her family back. She got our trust back. And she's got most of her relationships back, but she told me she's doing progress in a lot of them. She's now married to a great guy who's also in recovery. And she started a new career because she wanted to help other people and share her experiences because she has many. She's a peer recovery coach. And she's working on a master's degree at Wayne State in social work. So it's been a wild trip in those regards. We've come full circle. And I did a couple personal takeaways, okay? And these are personal to me, you know, right or wrong. Your addicted loved one has to want to be sober. They have to make that decision, okay? They have to make that decision, and they have to do the work required. You just can't say, I'm going to quit drinking. You know, you got to do the work, and we could sit here for another hour and talk about everything you need to do. And the people that have been successful here today know what that involves, right? We can only offer our love and support and direction, right? The family is affected by addiction almost as bad as the addict itself. And we have to take care of ourselves, you know, and that took a while. You know, when we were going through this, we didn't have organizations like FAN for support, you know. We basically were on our own on how to figure some of this stuff out. So, and pay attention to siblings in your family. You know, if you have siblings, you know, it's one thing maybe we didn't do a good job on. We were so tied up in this one daughter that we didn't really, in my opinion, focus enough on her. And this is a long journey. You know, it's not a sprint. Everybody I see here shakes their head, yeah, it's been involved with this, right? This is a journey. You have to have patience. You got to seek resources and support and guidance. And it's still a stigma to some degree, but, you know, there's a lot of stuff going on nationally, locally, and statewide that it's not becoming a stigma anymore. So hopefully more and more people will come out and do this. You know, addiction's one of the worst things a family and siblings can go through. But, you know, people do make it through, and there's a lot of, you know, stories here tonight about that. You know, as parents, you know, you can only do so much. We didn't have much control over the situation. You know, one thing we tried to do as spouses is, even though we disagreed on many things throughout this journey, we did mount a united front in front of her. So, you know, that would be a suggestion from me is, you know, try to agree with your spouse on the approach you want to take, even though you may not agree in private. And if you can early on, if you know you got something, you know, loved ones in a problem, try to set some boundaries. You know, we tried the old sign the contract thing, you know, with her. We've done a number of things. Some work, some don't. And at some point, we've talked a lot about this in our group, you know. A lot of these situations deteriorate, you know, and And the addict is not willing to help themselves. So, you know, and if you've been through this a long time as a parent or a grandparent or aunt or uncle or whatever, there may be a time you need to let go of this situation, you know. You know, you can only give them so much love and support and do all you can do. You know, it's up to them in the end.
Yeah.
And I will say, from our standpoint, faith and prayer were huge in this. That was a big part of our coping, our finding peace and joy and moving forward, you know. So, as parents, you can only do so much, and I hope they're on their own. I did want to say a shout out to the Canton police officers here. It reminded me of a night, more than one, but knock on the door, and it's a police officer. I wish I had the letter I wrote to the chief about him. I can't remember his name this time, but knock on the door, and he has my daughter with him, right? She's looking to break in cars to get some money to buy drugs, right? But he brought her home. He didn't take her to jail. And that made a big difference in the process too, and where she got. So I know I overtalked, but thank you. This is my wife. Got 2 minutes.
Thanks, Bob.
He took all your time.
Well, as Bob said, my name is Janine, and we do have a daughter in long-term recovery. Actually, on January 25th, she will be celebrating her 6 years. And my daughter was an alcoholic and a heroin addict. Just like you, in my wildest dreams, I never would have said I'd be saying those words. But even more surprising to me is that how easily tonight these words can just really flow out of my mouth. And as a parent of a child in long-term recovery, I'm asked a lot of questions, not just about our journey, but about our now. And I've been asked about when did I first realize that my life would be different? And I think it all hit home the day I was at a grocery store, and a parent of one of her friends, a parent I knew well, purposely avoided me. And you all know that move. Head down, steer the cart away, don't make eye contact. You know, pay a lot of attention to that bag of frozen mixed vegetables, you know, you just put in the cart. And as it began to happen again and again, I really became used to it. And actually, I began to employ that move myself. I really didn't want to talk to any of those people anyway. And even over time, even those people who knew her well just kind of quit asking about her. It was almost like she didn't exist. And I think that's really what hurt the most. I've been asked many times, do you ever get over it? And to that question, I have to answer absolutely no. One of the first things that we learned about addiction was that it was a chronic disease, it's a relapsing disease. And I think there will always be something in the back of my mind. I still do wake up in the middle of the night just to check to see what time it is. But that's something I did many times during the nights when she was MIA. But I don't get that sinking feeling in the pit of my stomach. And I think every mother out there will know what I'm talking about. But I do have one confession to make. I still do sometimes just call her up just because I want to hear her voice. I've often been asked, what do I think would be the one thing that we did that influenced her desire to get sober? And I've had a few discussions about that with her, and she said, Mom, I always knew what there was to come back to. No matter how crazy it got, both inside and outside of our home, we just had to keep on keeping on. We had jobs, we had responsibilities, we had another child to raise. We did vacations, we kept up with our family celebrations, we just kept trying to keep on keeping normal. If you were to hear her open talk, she speaks about a moment of clarity, and I think Bob mentioned that too. This is a time when she saw her reflection in a mirror, in a drug house in Detroit where she was living, and she knew that wasn't the person that she wanted to be. It really wasn't a surprise to us that this happened on a Sunday. Sundays were our family days. And this particular Sunday was the day I was being discharged from the hospital following surgery, a surgery that she knew about. It was her sister's birthday. It was Father's Day. That day that she chose to call for help, she knew what was missing in her life and what there was to come back to. She had said, "Mom, I knew you guys would all be together." Probably my least favorite question to answer is, how did you get through those dark days? And quite frankly, that is a question or a time I'd really rather forget. But all those years ago, there wasn't a support group like our fan support group that has really helped me a lot. I did try out Families Anonymous and also an Al-Anon, but they just weren't for me. I can remember coming home and saying to Bob, "I just can't take all that whining and complaining." I think if I heard one more time a mother say, if that boyfriend hadn't just given her that heroin, she wouldn't be where she is today. Well, I knew enough even back then to know that she wouldn't have been with that boy in the first place if there wasn't something already brewing. Anyhow, we had sympathetic family members who often said to us, "Oh, she just got in the wrong crowd." I knew early on that she was the wrong crowd. She drew others to her. I consider myself, though, one of the lucky ones. I had a very supportive spouse, and we knew we were together in this for the long haul. And as Bob mentioned, no matter how much we may have disagreed behind closed doors, we presented a united front in front of her. And when you're in the throes of dealing with an addictive child, there are many decisions that you have to make. And no matter how angry or how frustrated we were, there was still one thing that we did agree on, and that was that we didn't know whether what we were doing was right or wrong. We were just gonna have to trust God. We actually did make a pretty good team. I couldn't take the whole courtroom jumpsuit thing. I went to the courts that I had to go to. I had no problem doing jail visits. It was just something about that courtroom. But Bob never missed a court appearance, so kudos to him. My best friend's son was going down the same path, and we had each other for support. My sister is a counselor who's had some challenges with her own daughters, and she was always there for me. When I began to open up to friends and coworkers, I learned a lot of things. I learned about a sister who was killed in a drunk driving accident. The sister was the drunk driver. A coworker's daughter showed up at the same rehab facility our daughter was in. God always seemed to send someone alongside of me. It could have been a person, it could have been a word, or maybe even a scripture, but it just always seemed to be what I needed to get from Monday to Tuesday, because back then, that was all I was hoping to do. If I hadn't had my faith, I probably wouldn't have been able to get up out of bed in the morning. But now we have come full circle, and we have a fully functioning, independent adult. As Bob said, she has dedicated her life both personally and professionally to helping others in recovery. She works her AA program hard every day, and I've come to the realization that there is a large part of her life that I can never share in. She is surrounded by a community of people, her people, who love, support, and connect with her in a way that I'll never be able to fully understand nor fully be a part of. And for a mom who was once on speed dial, it can be challenging some days to be sitting in that back seat now. When asked if our family relationship is the same now as before, I think I can answer for our whole family. Absolutely not. It really is so much better now. I can't tell you how many times we thought we had seen the light at the end of the tunnel, only to realize that it was just another train coming, and we found ourselves knee-deep in yet another crisis another relapse, another arrest. The journey is a tough one, and there's no easy way around it. But my hope for you is that you will get to that end of the tunnel, because when you do, it really has been, at least for us, an amazing life. Thank you.
So Bob said that. It's not working. It's not working? Yes, we tried. Testing. It's not working. All right, well, that worked, I think so. You know, Bob said we are not experts, and on the one hand, that is true. You have to remember, we are parents just like you. Many people fear public speaking. This is difficult for these people to get up and share tonight. It's not easy, and to be honest and open and to share very many private things. And so, no, we're not experts in that regard, but we are experts because we have lived this and we know it inside and out. My name is Jackie Sanders, and my husband and I have a 34-year-old son with a history of substance abuse and also drug dealing. And I would say that his primary addiction was dealing drugs. He loved evading the police, outsmarting the police, and as he would say, living on the criminal fringe. He sold drugs downtown Detroit. He shuttled drugs between the city and out to the suburbs. He was part of a marijuana growing operation for a while. And all of that lasted on and off for about 10 years. And it culminated in a couple of felony convictions and several misdemeanor convictions. He now lives on the other side of the state. He works, he has an apartment. I don't like to speak to somebody else's sobriety, but if I just had to characterize it for tonight's conversation, I would say that for the last 4 years he has been clean but not sober. In other words, he would test clean for any illegal substances, but he still has many of the same behaviors, attitudes, habits as an addicted individual. And of course, there are all kinds of other legal things you could be involved in that have addictive qualities as well. My husband and I think, were somewhat prepared for the trauma of our son's addiction, not because we knew anything about drugs and alcohol or because we had history of addiction in our family, but because we had gone through an earlier traumatic experience with our younger son. He was born with really severe health issues, and he struggled the first 4 years of his life, and he nearly died. Our Christian faith sustained us during that time, and we had many opportunities to test and live out the things that we believed. For example, we came to accept that really bad things can happen to good people. Life is just not fair. We accepted that our child might die before we did. We came to recognize the need of support of other people during times of crisis, and we actually got to the point where we welcomed that. We learned that we could find moments of happiness even though we were living daily in crisis. And we learned that good things can still emerge out of suffering. And as it turned out, all of those lessons that we learned with our younger son through his medical crisis ended up also applying to the addiction of our older son. I think as parents with addicted children, you may need to wrestle with some of these big questions in life before you even begin to think about your child's problems with addiction. My husband and I also had benefited from observing another family dealing with addiction. At that time, our minister had 2 older teens who were both addicted to heroin. Now that would probably bring shame and embarrassment maybe even today, but at that time it was unimaginable. Nobody talked about that situation. It was completely kept secret. And I could see the harm that did both of those boys. I could see the harm it did their parents, and even how it hurt the community by keeping that silent. So when our son got into trouble, we told him immediately we were going to handle things differently. We would not be supportive in any way of his drug use. In fact, we told him, when you get arrested, don't call us. And of course, he soon got arrested. He did try to call, but my husband just hung up the phone. He knew where we stood in that. We made it clear to him we would not help conceal this destructive lifestyle that he was leading. It was helpful, just like Bob and Janine said, that my husband and I shared a common philosophy about addiction. It was a struggle to be on the same page at times. I'm not sure we did as good as Bob and Janine did always at providing that united front. But I think generally we had the same approach, and I would encourage families to hash some of those things out right in the beginning. For example, do you believe that addiction is a disease? Or do you believe it's a disorder? Or do you think that alcohol is a drug? Do you allow addictive substances in your home that are legal? Those are things that you need to try to get on the same page about. So I thought I had a pretty good foundation, actually, for beginning to work with our son's addiction. And I was ready right away. I didn't have a long period of denial. It was pretty blatant, actually, what he was doing. And I was ready for support. I wanted to talk to other people who could tell me about their experiences and share resources and encourage me. The problem was I could not find that kind of help. I did try Nar-Anon and Al-Anon, the 12-step family support groups that are associated with Narcotics Anonymous and Alcoholics Anonymous. I know they help many people. I'm a big supporter of 12-step support groups for addicted individuals too. I mean, talk about a healthcare model, right? Free and easy access to everyone. But just for me, those family support groups that are associated with 12-step programs just were not a fit for me. Just like addicts we have to have many different paths to recovery, I think we have to have different paths to recovery for the family members as well. There were two ways in which those groups did not meet my needs. First of all, for me, the format of the meeting didn't work. At those meetings, as you know, each person is supposed to, by custom, they're supposed to speak uninterrupted until they feel that they have been heard. And then once they have been heard, they're thanked for sharing, and the next person speaks. There is to be no questions or comments. That is referred to as crosstalk, and it is highly discouraged, and I know that from personal experience. That is probably a really good format for a peer-led group of addicted individuals. That kind of gives some structure to your meetings. There are no professionals in this meeting. These are just, peers like yourself. But I was not an addicted individual. I felt as an emotionally healthy person, I could really benefit and handle a free exchange of information, experiences, and ideas. And actually people to hold you accountable as well. Secondly, I didn't feel like that recovery plan met my needs. You know that the 12 steps were originally intended for addicted individuals. But over time, they were adopted by the family support groups that are associated with them. So consequently, both the addicted individual and then the supportive family member like myself are following the very same recovery plan and the same steps, even though I felt that the two groups had very different needs. So for example, step number 1 in AA, and its family support group, Al-Anon, both groups, say we admitted we were powerless over alcohol and that our lives had become unmanageable. That is a critical step for an addicted person. It's their turning point. When I'm in a group with those people and they read that step out loud together, that can bring me to tears. But it didn't resonate with me because I was not an addicted individual. My life truly was not unmanageable. It almost seemed disingenuous to me, or almost disrespectful that I was saying that. So the format of those meetings did not match my needs, and neither did the recovery plan itself. So, long story short, I just started my own support group. It was a faith-based group for moms whose children are leading destructive lives. It's called Heart Cry. It has met for about 12 years now, and it addressed both of those concerns that I had. We allow for a more natural give and take of conversation during our share time. And we also follow an original 12-step recovery plan that I designed specifically for family members. And you probably received a copy of those steps when you came in tonight. And so it's different than those traditional groups. Like, for example, our step number 1 was, I admit my child is abusing drugs or alcohol. Step 2, I grieve the loss of a healthy relationship with my child and the expectations I had for their future. Step 3, I release my burden of guilt. So all of these steps are written specifically for the family member. This is what I work on in my own recovery. And then 2 years ago, our fan chapter here decided to start a family support group, and I got involved in that. I helped to start it, and basically they follow that same format and the same steps that I just talked about. And then soon, our fan organization is going to be starting support groups using our group as the model, and they're going to spread those across the state at all their fan chapters. I believe that participating in support groups has significantly impacted my own recovery. I take my own recovery seriously. I would say I work on it every day. You gotta work the program, right? Isn't that what you say in AA? That way the negative thoughts and emotions and attitudes don't begin to build up with me. I think you can see from the people on the panel here, just looking at them, that your life does not have to be destroyed just because your loved one has an addiction issue. I can truly say that I live a life of hope and purpose, and that I measure my success not on whether my child enters long-term recovery, because I can't control that. I measure my success on whether I emerge from this experience as a better and stronger person.
Wow, I have to go after that. So hello, my name is Kelly Harding. I'm not a public speaker by any stretch of the imagination, so please bear with me. My daughter Brittany Harding, she's 28 years old, and she has been affected by the disease of addiction. Her drug of choice is heroin. Brittany's father and I were together for 5 years, but we divorced when she was 2.5, so I raised her as a single parent. I'll start off by sharing a little bit about my beautiful ray of sunshine. Brittany was sweet, loving, always so giving. She would give the shirt off of her back, even when she was active in her addiction. We would often go out to a restaurant or to the grocery store together, and she would always gain the attention of others. And as a proud mom, I signed her up in the cutest baby contest, and she actually won runner-up and was in our local parade. Academically, Brittany was an average student with B's and C's. I always tried to keep her active. She was in Girl Scouts, dance, sports. Growing up, Brittany had the best friends a mom would want for their children. They would come over, watch movies, we would do things, play games together, and her friends actually called me their second mom. During her high school years, she started getting rebellious, and we started butting heads. Imagine that. And then after her senior year, she decided that she wanted to move out on her own. And right then and there, it was just like a downward spiral. She started using drugs, and she was affected for over 10 years now. But I want to move forward. Probably about the last 2 years, she's had her longest stretch of sobriety. She was sober for 18 months. And that was a true blessing. I felt like I had my daughter back. But she ended up having a few things happen to her. She got laid off from work. She had a medical procedure done, and she also got off probation. During her sobriety, she got her own car, an apartment, a job, and was living a normal life as much as she possibly could. But actually in the last 2 months, she's been using and struggling again on and off for about two and a half months. But actually, last week she checked herself into St. Mary's and detoxed, and she is currently sober for about 5 days. I'll share a little bit about me and who I was prior to Brittany's addiction. I'm a happy-go-lucky person. I'm very outgoing, bubbly. I always like to have fun and go out with my friends. Always busy being a mom. Had a full social calendar. I played sports as well. I enjoyed going to different venues. I was the type of person when I went out. I always met friends wherever I went. That's just the kind of person I was. And I actually always said that when I went out, if I didn't have a good time, it was my own fault, right? And I'm not gonna allow that to happen. So, well, next thing you know, all that changed, right? For the first 4 or 5 years of my daughter's addiction, I isolated myself from all of my family and friends. I only spoke to my mom and maybe 1 or 2 other people. I would try to go to family functions, and but I just felt like I didn't fit in. I didn't belong. I didn't feel accepted. I didn't have anything to contribute to their conversations of all the great things my cousins and nieces and nephews were doing. I didn't have that so-called perfect family image. But somehow, being a strong person and outgoing, I was able to gather up enough strength to always do the right thing when my daughter was active in her addiction. For me, the right thing was to love her from a distance. It was to set my boundaries and stick with them. I didn't allow her to live in my home when she was active in her addiction. I couldn't stop her from using, so I did everything in my power to save her, even if it had criminal consequences. I called the police on her several times to do wellness checks. I would go to her court dates. I would talk to the judges and people there. I have 2 grandchildren, and I've even called CPS on her a handful of times. So I just always tried to do the right thing that I would hope that would save my daughter. So I've been told by people being involved in the support group and that I was always very strong with sticking to my boundaries. And I really didn't start my own personal healing and recovery until I started opening up and reaching out to others. My true turning point when I was online one day and I met this mom, and I didn't know her from Adam, but somehow her and I just really connected. And she's like, you know, we've been getting along, let's go do lunch. So we went and did lunch, and it was about an hour long, and something came over me, and I said, I'm gonna tell her about my daughter. I'm gonna tell her my story. So I did. And by doing that, in turn, she felt comfortable to tell me her story. She said, Kelly, I'm an addict. She said, I lost my nursing license. She said, I was a nurse. She said, I'm addicted to pills. So then she was stealing the pills from where she worked. An hour lunch turned into a 4-hour lunch. We've been friends ever since. And about 2 weeks after our luncheon, she said, you really need to get on Facebook and sign up for this group. It's called The Addict's Mom. So I did. I read all these stories where women would share what they're going through and their difficulties. And I finally said to myself, this is somewhere I belong. I feel comfortable and like I fit in. So then one of the moms on The Addict's Mom opened up her home to have a Christmas party, and all the moms that attended were moms like me. Their children were affected by the disease of addiction. There I met Lauren Russo, which is the president of our fan chapter, and her and I started chatting, and she said, I'm thinking about starting a fan chapter here in Wayne County. Would you be interested? And I said, yes, of course. I was so eager. I started attending board meetings, and the next thing they know, they asked me to be the treasurer, because I have an accounting background. So getting involved with FAN is what really helped me grow as a person, educating myself. The resources are provided, the support from everyone is what really helped me. Because honestly, I was so naive, I didn't even know what opiates were, and I never even honestly thought it was a disease, but now I know differently. I was that person where you see someone on the side of the road, and I would say, why don't they go get a job, right? I didn't understand. So then, the treasurer, I would attend monthly board meetings, and all the board members started talking about opening up and starting our Friends and Family Peer Support Group. And once again, I volunteered and said yes. I would love to help get this group up and running. And this has been so beneficial to me in my recovery. It helps me when I'm helping others. I love to give back, and I always try to be the person that I needed when I first found out about my daughter's addiction to someone else. So slowly my life started coming back together, and I started doing things, enjoying my life, and doing a little self-care. And speaking of self-care, in the middle of my daughter's addiction, being a single mom, I started getting out a little bit in the dating world. And how hard was it for me as a mom, you know, where my daughter was affected by the disease of addiction, to meet somebody and have to say, you know, admit that, right? That was like a very difficult thing to do. But in the middle of addiction, 6 years ago, I met this loving, caring, supportive, non-judgmental man that helped change my life forever. He is my saint. About 4 or 5 dates in, because I'm an honest person, I said, Kevin, I have to be honest with you. My daughter's affected by the disease of addiction. And this wonderful man said to me, every family has their issues. You just have to work through them. So through everything, he stood by my side this entire time. We are now married, and I am blessed.
I went old school. I didn't take up class. I'm not an English major, and I'm not a speaker either, so.
But you're a saint.
All right, my name's Kevin O'Reilly. This is my story. Before Kelly and I were dating, I might be a little different here because I've never had children and I've never been married before. And then, you know, first month into it, like Kelly mentioned, she said she has a daughter that has drug-addicted problems, you know. And for me, at the beginning, her daughter at that time was in the Salvation Army. And every Sunday we went to visit her at this time. I went with Kelly to support her. I really didn't support her daughter because I didn't know her daughter. With Kelly's daughter getting out of rehabs, her daughter, Brittany, and I didn't have a relationship. So she didn't get the chance to know me, and I didn't get the chance to know the real Brittany. For the first 4.5 years, that's pretty much what that was, as Kelly and I were dating. One of the many times her daughter wasn't doing good, she was at a hotel with her 2.5-year-old son, doing drugs, and not in a good place. So Kelly and I, sitting in the parking lot, we knew where she was at. And there's a lot of emotions going on, you don't know what to do, how to handle this. But in the end result, it was about the grandchild that needed to get out of that environment. So we went to the police department, and they were going to come out and arrest her, and we were waiting in the parking lot for the police at that time. So police and CPS got involved, we ended up taking the grandson that night until CPS figured out what to do next. So Kelly and I ended up taking care of her grandson for a year until the parents could meet the requirements of CPS so her grandson wouldn't have to go to foster care. it was a lot on Kelly and I. Her grandson was a handful with behavioral issues because of the drugs that he was addicted to being born. As much as I didn't want to get attached to him, I ended up getting attached. During that time as well, Kelly and I were attending counseling for grandparents raising grandchildren. Those meetings were very good and helpful as well. It was all, actually, I think we were the youngest ones in there, but, you know, they had to take care of their grandkids, and it was all the same stories of their son or daughter was in trouble. Then her daughter had a second child. Shortly after that, I mentioned to Brittany that she should consider giving up the newborn because she was struggling herself at that time, and she couldn't handle the first child. And I don't know if I was crossing the line at that point, but other family members kind of thought the same at that point. It always seemed like every time Kelly and I tried to do anything together and spend time with each other, there was always some sort of drama, phone calls that ruined our time together. And it was really tough on me because this was all new to me, a lot of this. So, like most of us in this room, we never asked for any of this. I told Kelly, whether it's our story or somebody else's with addiction, you can't even make these stories up of what everybody goes through. This person would, I don't know. I never knew how much to get involved with this or what to say at times. At first, since I never had children of my own, I never wanted to cross any lines with Kelly and Brittany whenever there was things going on, especially in the early times, because it wasn't my daughter. I just kind of sat back, tried to support her the best I can. It was very awkward for me. All this opened my eyes and educated myself as well. With Kelly and I being a part of Families Against Narcotics, going to grandparents raising grandchildren, meetings, the family and friends peer support group, I can definitely see how this all can be hard on a marriage as well. Because like somebody says, we need to get more males involved with this. It seems like primarily it's women here. The last couple of years, her daughter and I started getting closer in our relationship, supporting her with the struggles she has and spending time with her grandchildren. And now that I'm her stepdad now. So, and finally, for me, being by Kelly's side through all this is very meaningful because nobody asked for any of this, and you definitely need the people around you to try to support you and comfort you and get through this. And this does help as far as educating myself, and I can relate to people at work now and, steer them in a direction, because it is easy to stereotype everybody's problem when it really isn't until you really know more about it, so that's my story.
Did such a terrific job. And even the questions that we have, each of you covered.
Yeah.
Answer to some of the questions. But one question that I think you've started talking about, that I would give to the panel, is did your experience with your addicted child cause problems in your relationship with your spouse or your significant other? And how did you work through those problems?
I would say, yes, it did affect us. We had many disagreements on our approach to this problem. We had differing opinions on where to seek help, what to do next, what lawyer to call, you know. What court am I going to this month, you know? So, how did we get, you know, you just have to set it aside, you know, set aside the problem, you know, and still know that you have a relationship with your spouse, you know? And like, no one asked for this, like Kevin says. So you just gotta work together, you know, and sort of think it through on how you're gonna approach it, you know? And like I say, it's a journey. And every part of that journey, as parents, you go through different emotions, you go through different trials, you go through different issues. It's all different along that path, you know, of addiction, starting to real addiction, to trying to rehab it, you know, and work through that. It just takes, it's a long process. So you gotta have patience, you know. So.
I would say I've worked with a lot of families over the year, and I would say that it seems to me, I have no statistics, but I would say most marriages don't survive. If your marriage is already a little bit shaky, this is gonna do you in. My husband said the other night, it's gonna make you, it's gonna break you. I often find that one of the partners is firm, and the other one, just by nature, is maybe a little more gentle. And if you have a healthy child, that works out just fine, doesn't it? There's a balance there. But when you get into the issue of addiction, now the one who's firm thinks they need to be a little bit more firmer. And because they've done that, the one that's gentle thinks we need to ease up just a little bit more, and you begin working further and further apart. And so there were times when I just had to say, I'm sure my husband's wrong, but I'm just gonna go along to go along. You know, we try to bring that together more in the middle.
I would just say, being a single mom, I had to do it on my own, so I didn't have the spouse, you know. When Kevin came in my life, like you said, he kind of stayed out of things, and, you know, I would often ask him, honey, would you like to say anything or contribute to the matter or what have you, but yeah, Brittany's father was in the picture like every other weekend. Dad, you know, like for the parenting visitation, so he wasn't a big part in her life, and she didn't have the relationship or the connection with her father like her and I did, because we were mother and daughter, and we were like best friends, and we still are today.
What do you think is the primary coping approach in dealing with it that worked best for each of you?
I think we started out at ground zero, like everybody else, and we just happened to come across actually the Dawn Farms educational series. And I think kind of knowledge is power, and once you begin to understand the addiction as a disease and all the things that go along with it, as well as meeting other people, like in support. We met people at that educational series, and learned about resources and things like that. So I think that was probably one of our primary coping is, I think, you know, we felt like a little more in control when you have knowledge about things. Also, we've mentioned this, and Jackie's mentioned about having our faith, and I think that was extremely helpful to us. And, you know, we're pretty, you know, there was a time when I was kind of isolated, but we're pretty open about, you know, reaching out and talking to other people. And like I said, I think that was helpful to us too. And, you know, we also have been, well, we'll be married 45 years in May, so we've been a long time. Early on in our marriage, we had some things that we had to overcome, things that quite frankly, some of our friends also went through and never made it to the other end of. And we did, and I think that helped us to be strong as a couple as well.
Very good.
I would would say, you know, I was extremely open about our situation. I do not think that is the approach for everyone, okay? I think that was just maybe a gift I had. Right at the beginning of this, we had started a new church, and I had asked if I could start the support group, so they said, well, you can get up and say a little bit about it at the morning service. So I got up and I said, hi, I'm Jackie Sanders, now I'm first time meeting most of these people, and my son is an addict. That was quite a shock to that congregation. But I was just like that all the time. I just told people I was open and honest about it, and that took a lot of pressure off of me because I didn't have to try to hide things. And then in a practical way, both my husband and I exercised a lot. That was a good stress reliever for us. I kept busy at work. I don't know if that was good or not, but really threw myself into my work to keep busy. And of course, the support groups were very helpful for me.
Yeah, that was pretty much my coping strategy because I isolated myself for 4 or 5 years, like I shared in my story. And getting involved and giving back and volunteering. And once I was able to open up and start to share my story and I felt comfortable, that's what has really truly saved me. And of course, meeting Kevin.
And there was this, the grandparents raising grandchildren too. She always emphasized too, as hard as this is, you guys have to have your life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that really is, you have to just try to break away and have some sort of sanity and laughter. So.
At this time, we'd like to ask if anyone in the audience has any questions for our panel.
I had a question for Davis's. I was wondering how the sibling relationship went about during active addiction, how it is now, and if you had any pointers that could possibly help with that.
Good question.
Our daughters are about 3.5 years apart, and usually I'll say, you know, this is their story to tell, but I can tell a little bit from the mom's perspective is, our daughter was a freshman in high school, our youngest daughter was a freshman in high school, and our oldest daughter was a senior. And the senior drove to school, this was our attic, and a lot of stuff that was going on that we didn't know. The child that was an addict did a lot of things, hurtful things to the younger child. She drove her to school in the morning, but then she skipped out of school, and the youngest one had to walk home. She used her as a front, she manipulated her, she lied to her. It was awful. And I have to say, there was a point when I thought, if we ever get to the end of this, I don't know how we'll ever do something like a holiday, because those two girls could never be in the same room together. Well, I can tell you now that they are like best friends. Yes, I mean, but this was a long time in the making. And in fact, the youngest one just got married, and she didn't want to have a bachelorette party. She wanted to spend the day with her sister. The two of them went downtown, went to dinner, to a concert. They spent the night, and that's just how they are. If what the younger one has a problem, she calls the big sister now. I mean, and to be honest, as a parent, I thought I'd never see that happen.
The only thing I would add to that is bring your other sibling into the story some, you know. Ask her feelings, you know. What's your sister, your brother, you know? How do you feel about that, you know? Just keep them involved and educated too, you know.
Our youngest one was very closed. She did not want to talk at all. We did take her to counseling once, and she just did not want to open up and all. And just now, she's beginning to open up to she'll meet someone who has a family member that's had in treatment or in recovery, and now she's able to kind of help them. And so, yeah, it's been a long, long journey.
You know, I said that I was very honest and open about our situation, and in my mind, I thought that's what my younger son needed. But he just knew what was going on. We always told him he was 4 years younger than his brother, so he was beginning high school when his brother got in trouble. But it's only been through my work with our fan support group and people bringing up issues and stuff that I really began to realize in the last 2 years the hurt that has caused him. I thought letting him know about it was enough, but it's not. He was too young, he needed help processing that information. He just didn't need to know his brother was in jail. He needed to talk about those things. He probably would have been a good candidate for counseling. I wish I would have done that. And just fairly recently, talking about this with families and women that I work with, it is a huge issue. I don't think you can overcompensate enough for that other child, to do special things just with them, to let them know that they're not overlooked. The problem is initially we think this is only gonna last a little while. I'm just gonna shift all my focus onto this child till the crisis is over. That's what you do in a crisis, right? When grandma's sick, grandma gets the attention, and then when she's better, we go back to our normal routine. But in our cases, these addiction issues have gone on for so long. I do have a handout that I wrote about the impact of addiction on siblings. It has 13 ways that I've come across recently where kids are really harmed, and I have extra copies of those. If you're interested, I can give you one after, but all kinds of things. My younger son just recently confided in me that people were embarrassed to ask my husband and I anymore about what was going on with our son. They would come to him.
Yeah.
My son was 15, 16 years old, and people were saying, could you just tell me what's going on with Mark? And he said, Mom, I didn't know if I should lie about it or if I should just ask my mom and dad, and I didn't want to tell you guys. And he carried all of that for all this time. So I think the impact on the siblings is significant, and it needs a lot of attention. And it's one of my big regrets. I think I made a big mistake there.
We have any other questions?
Kelly and Kevin, I can really relate with your story. I wanted to know a little bit more about grandparents raising grandchildren. It's still real fresh, and I've been raising my granddaughter for a year and a half now.
Yeah,
And CPS, you know, the whole
I do.
drill. She recently got my daughter recently got her back, but it's still, I still feel like there's still a lot on my shoulders,
Right, absolutely.
you know, and the expectations.
Yes, I will be more than happy to give you, it's at Ward Church, and if you see me after this, I'll give you her contact name and number. And I would be willing to go with you if you'd like as well.
And some of you might have heard that woman who leads that group was a speaker.
Elaine Williams?
Yeah, what was the forum just recently that she led here?
Yeah. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
So if you were here, you've heard her speak, and so, yeah, she's a wonderful resource. I refer people to her as well.
Do we have any other questions from the audience?
I wanted to, I've been coming here to band for about a year now. I've learned so much, and I've always loved volunteering. That's why I mentioned it in the beginning. And being here, I didn't understand what the addiction, the whole thing about addiction and how it affected the brain. And I didn't want to embarrass Dr. Christensen. He's over here from Don Farm. And the first meeting that I came to was at Cherry Hill Theater, and he did such a wonderful demonstration about the effects of drugs and on the brain and dual addiction and things like that. So as a volunteer or a mentor, this group here would be so beneficial to getting out in the community, because you can't get out in the community and explain, you're not a professional about addiction. But as a volunteer and someone that's interested in helping this big problem that we have in the United States, we need more groups, we need more mentors, people that, you don't have to be a professional to be a mentor. You know, you just get a little bit of understanding of what you're dealing with, and then you can go forward to help. And I want to thank people like Dr. Christensen, God bless him. And all the people that are board members here have done such a wonderful job. And I've just been coming here for
Denise.
You know, there are a lot of issues, I think, that we talk about in that group that I don't see much information on. Like, I think, wow, I want to know more about that. I'm going to Google that. But I just don't find a lot. For example, should you ask your addicted child to leave your home? People say to me, how did you decide that? Well, I got a handout on that if you want to know. Just because I've talked to parents and gathered this information. But that is not, those are not things that I see discussed. The impact of addiction on siblings we talk about. Planning for the crisis of jail. You need to have a plan. If your child is addicted, you need a plan ahead of time how you're going to address that. People will say to me, I guess we'll find out when it happens. Too late. Your child is scheming and thinking all the time. They are far ahead of you. You need your plan right now. Are you going to bail them out? Are you going to hire a lawyer? How is that going to go down? Planning for the crisis of relapse. You don't wait till they relapse to start thinking about what your stand is on that. You need to have a plan in place right now that they know about. So they know if they can call you or what your response is going to be or how you're going to support them during that. We didn't talk about much here the financial impact on the family when it comes to addiction. I have to say, we didn't feel the financial impact because we had a plan ahead of time. He knew we would not bail him out of jail. We would not pay for a lawyer. I'm not saying that's the right thing to do. I'm saying that was our plan. We were able to stick to it. But I also have had women in my group who have lost their homes. I had a woman whose husband was an executive in the auto business, and she was elderly. She died during the time that she was in my group. They lost everything they had. They were living in a tiny little 2-bedroom house at the end of their life because they had financially supported their addicted son and later their addicted grandson. So these are things you need to think about ahead of time, and by coming to a support group, you can get that information, and you can also benefit by how other people here handle those situations. Sometimes we handle them beautifully, and you can maybe follow our motto, and sometimes we make huge mistakes, and you can benefit from that and not make the mistakes that we did.
It's a great point, Jackie, and it kind of segues into one of the other questions that we wanted to kind of cover. If each panelist could talk to, if there are people in the audience that are dealing with this, what would your top 3 to 5 recommendations be? And you don't have to have 3 to 5. You can have 1 to 2. Well, what would be your top recommendations for whether it's parents, siblings, significant others? What are your top recommendations for them and how to address it?
Well, I'll start just with one thing. Every parent who talks about their pre-addicted child talks about, as Bob did, you know, she was smart and had lots of friends and musically talented and all that. But yet, every AA meeting I've ever gone to where they give the open talk, the speaker starts out with something like, I never felt like I fit in. I never felt comfortable in my own skin. Our own daughter talks about a void in her life that alcohol and later drugs filled. We were totally oblivious to that void. We saw the gal with lots of friends who made straight A's, who was the accompanist for the high school, was the youth choir leader at our church. That's what we saw. And we were totally oblivious. It caught us totally off guard. So I think if you're new in this tonight, or even if you've been at it for a while, you may want to look a little deeper. Have a hard conversation with your addicted loved one, and maybe kind of it will be maybe helpful in the long run if some of the underlying things that were there could be brought to the surface early, or than, you know, you're picking them up at a drug house in Detroit.
I'd just add, you know, we went through what I said. We didn't have the resources. We didn't have Dr. Christian doing these. All the panels they have had at FAN have been phenomenal, stretching from all across the spectrum. You know, law enforcement, you know, government, everybody. But addicts. So it's, you know, we didn't have all that education. So I would say, you know, if you sense your child or loved one is running down the path, try to get educated yourself. Come to meetings, go wherever you have to go to get educated. If they're young enough and you still have control, because you only got control till they're 18, right? So, you know, if they're under 18 and you sense it, try to intervene as soon as you can, is my opinion, you know. Set some boundaries. Establish a contract between you and your kid, or whatever it takes, you know, to try to prevent it from escalating. And prepare for a long journey.
I would say that early intervention for sure, and say no early. Say no, draw those boundaries right away, because the first time maybe you draw that boundary, it's because they want $20 for gas. That's not so hard to say no. No, I'm not going to give you $20 for gas. I know where your money is going. I'm not going to support that. But if you don't say no then, down the road, when you finally decide to say no, it's going to be a tough thing to do, and it can be under very difficult circumstances. Maybe they're saying, I can't make my car payment, and they're used to you bailing them out, so they expect you to, but this time you decide you're going to say no. But the problem is, you co-signed for that car when you couldn't say no, right? Now you're faced with, am I going to let them repossess the car? Am I going to hurt my credit? I mean, sometimes I'm working with families and I'm thinking, I don't know how you're going to say no now. This has gone on for so long, it's so entrenched, it's so tangled and complicated, it's going to be hard to say no. And in those cases, sometimes you just have to start saying no gradually. You might say, or for some people they just have such a tender heart they can't say no. So maybe you start out by saying no to buying them any clothes. And then next thing you say, and I'm not going to be able starting next month to help you pay your rent. And you might have to start incrementally if that's, you know, the way you have to do it. I would also say continue to love your child. Most of us would say that we do not like our children. It is hard to like you, I hate to say this, but if you are an addict, it's hard to like you. And that is because to have a relationship, both people have to have understanding and respond to the other person's needs. And if you're addicted, you've only got one need, and it's not us. So we don't like you very much, that's the truth, and that's hard for us to accept. But we still love you. Now that can be hard too, but sometimes we have to think about that very most basic definition of love, which is treating somebody with dignity and respect. You can still work towards doing that for your addicted child. When we bring prisoners into the courtroom, we still treat the worst criminals in the world with dignity and respect, and you can do that to your child. If they talk to you in a disrespectful way, you don't have to answer them in kind. You can still show that love, and you could show love in small ways. We all know not to give our addicted child any money, but you could give them a hug, you could take them out to lunch. You know, there are lots of little things you can do to show that you continue to love them, but you have drawn some very firm boundaries with them. And my other piece of advice, I think, is so many families still have this addicted loved one in their home, and I know that is a very personal matter, but I hear so many families say, you know, my 35-year-old son is living in the basement still. I hear that story so often, and I think it is important to make peace in your home a priority. What is it going to take to establish peace in your home? You deserve to feel safe in your house, and if you don't, and if it's filled with chaos, then it's time for you to take a step and correct that.
I would second that thought.
You know what it made me think of? Well, it made me think the social worker in me is like screaming, self-care, self-care. So it kind of segues into, what are the ways that you found, real ways that you found? I know a couple of you talked about we had to get away from the problem. We had to spend time with each other. How did you kind of put a plan in place for that self-care? When you get so connected with what's going on with your child, it can take over your whole life, like Jackie's talking about, finances, everything. Were there things that you found that you could do for self-care that really worked, that allowed you to step away from the problem and get rejuvenated?
Exercise. I would exercise, I would play sports. You know, that was what helpful for me.
That's good. How about you?
Any chance we can get to break away and spend time, whether it's going out for a dinner and not talk about it, you know, and just talk about the simpler things instead of the complex things that's going on.
That's great.
I think one of the other benefits of doing that, it helps us, but it also lets your child see that they are not the focus of everything. They would be very happy if you stay at home and worry about them. They are egocentric. But if you say, hey, we're going on vacation, I know my son was shocked. What do you mean you're going on vacation? Life needs to revolve around him as far as he's concerned. Oh no, I call it holy homesickness. He's going to see that we're having such a nice time and we're the family that we've always been, and I hope that tugs on his heart. I hope it breaks his heart till he wants to be a part of that again.
We experienced similar, and I think it was very helpful for us just to keep on doing the things that we always did. It made me, when we were talking about this, made me think of a time we had scheduled an out-of-town trip, and our daughter just happened to be being discharged from rehab while we were gone, and so we just said, well, figure it out. Find somebody to pick you up, but find a place to go. It's not going to be our house, you know. And I think, you know, they're very resourceful.
Yeah.
I mean, very resourceful. So, you know, don't worry about that.
So as you did it, the more comfortable it was to be able to establish that.
When we got the call from Washtenaw County Jail, you know, the public official or whatever it was on the other line telling me all the things we could do, you know, bail and when the arraignment would be and doing this, and I'm like, no. And I said, finally I said to her, I said, you know, we've done all that.
And I did more.
And she said to me, Roger that.
Okay, do we have any other questions? Shara?
I just wanted to say to all 5 of you up there, thank you so much. I think this was one of the best forums that we've had, because truly it's about the families, it's about all of you and all of you. And I want to thank you for bearing your deepest, darkest souls and your stories to help others. And I want to thank all of you for taking the time out to come. My question is, oftentimes, as I'm going throughout my day, and I'm talking about fans and the support groups and the things that we have, I know that there's so many hurting people out there in our communities, especially here in Canton, wherever you come from. There's a lot of hurting families. And oftentimes, when I'm talking to people, I get this, I deal with that all day long, I don't have time to come, which I think kind of goes toward to you, Kelly, because you know, you just wanted to shut down. I tend to shut down as extroverted as I am. When I have things on my mind, I tend to shut down. Total opposite of what we should do. So what advice would you have for us as we're speaking to other people, and actually everybody in this room, because we're all touching somebody each and every day, especially you guys, right? How can we reach out in a soft way to somebody like you who wants to be introverted and I don't have the capacity to do it anymore?
The only thing I would recommend is show compassion, and it's even worked not only with my friends, is my daughter, because a lot of times I would shut down and I wouldn't want to talk, and I was embarrassed, and I didn't want to go to family, you know, gatherings and functions, and I guess just really show people that you really care and love them, and show compassion and let them know that they are important and that they're just affected by this disease. I needed for me, I needed my own recovery, right? But fortunately, some people I know, they become addicted to their son or daughter, right? So for me, by setting those personal boundaries for me and for my daughter, it was helpful.
Anybody else?
Well, it sounds like you're asking the question on how can you expand the
Yeah, just because there's so many-
information to people that are in need.
There's just so many people that are struggling, you know, especially a lot of parents that are struggling with kids at the very beginning stages in high school. You know, whether they're smoking a lot of marijuana or, you know, drinking a lot or just destructive coping, you know, negative coping skills that they're starting to develop.
Yeah, Jackie and I have been talking about in our support group, it's kind of like a sponsor, right? To pair them up with somebody, someone that you feel that they would connect with, or like their story, like the lady here, you know. It's always nice to have that extra support, or someone you can call or ask a question to.
I don't think it hurts to be a little pushy, actually. If I see somebody that I know, their profile would, you know, from their profile, they would benefit from a group like ours, not just mention it to them, but then go back again, ask them if they want to go out for lunch. Just kind of keep at them and let them know, and when they're ready, it's funny, a lady called me recently and she said, can you help me? I did not know her. No, she texted me. I did not know her. And I said, well, okay, you know, what's going on? She tells me a little bit about her son. She says, can you meet with me? I said, sure. You can come on over to my house because I had to be at the home. I said, you come over. She came over that afternoon, and when she walked in the door, I said, could you just kind of tell me how you know about me, because I don't even know who you are. And she said, it was about 10 years ago, she said, I heard you talk at a breakfast. 10 years. But she remembered, and when she was ready and she needed it, she came back. So don't give up, just keep talking to people, keep sharing information, keep letting them know that there's help out there and you're willing to help. And maybe it will be 10 years down the road, but you're there for them.
Thank you. Was there another question over here?
You were talking about coming home. Working.
I think that you-
Coming home and you're just tired and you don't want to go anywhere. I find that too. I'm a retired teacher, but they call me constantly, and I have a big heart, and I'm always helping. It looks like I'm going to be stuck in another 3 or 4 week job, which I found out today, and I tried to come going, all I want to do is go home and sit on the couch, go to an exercise class, and I went, no, I need to go to this, this meeting, and I do belong with the parent support group, so this is 3 days a month. It's 3 days out of 30. And my husband, we're both like that. It would be one of us wants to go, or it's like, oh, do you really want, let's go. And we always go and walk out going, we're so glad we came. Because there's always something new that you learn. So that's a say, if there's anybody here that has a sibling, child, please try to show up at one of our meetings here on next Tuesday and then 2 weeks after that. Because they are amazing, they're amazing. And you don't even have to talk, come sit and listen.
Great advice. Any other questions? We good? Well, I guess I'll just close out. Let's just give a great round of applause. And regardless of what you said, Bob, I do still think you guys are experts.
You make it pretty good.
You guys really did a great job, and we can't thank you enough. And I think this venue is something that we should do on an annual basis for sure, because I just think that there's a lot that we all can learn from one another. And I thank each and every one of you for coming out this evening, in a cool, can't even see cold, cool January evening. But I hope that you all come back in February for Dr. Greenwald's talk. Please grab flyers, and again, our annual training for Hope Not Handcuffs, those flyers back there. Oh, question?
When you get the thing of the dates, what's gonna happen at each meeting for the year, will Will they send that out with our email?
Yes, we'll send that out, and they'll be out on the Facebook page as well, but we'll have those printed available, so you can take those and pass them out, you know, to friends and family members, so that'll be good. But we have more sandwiches, I don't wanna take them home, or the police are gonna have to take them back with them, so rather than